Hello again guys, welcome back to the channel and welcome back to Microsoft Flight Simulator Flight School. This video will be the last in the Flight School series for a little while now, and in this flight we'll be putting together everything that we've learned so far with a full VFR navigation exercise from Bias over towards the Dexter B. Florence Memorial Airport. Just as a little reminder, this flight is based on the previous lesson. We'll be departing out of Bias Airport towards the south, heading towards Lake Greeson. We'll then turn eastwards towards the town of Delight, and then on towards the town of Arkadelphia, landing at the Dexter B. Florence Memorial Airport. As always guys, I do hope you enjoy the video. If you do, please consider giving it a like and subscribing to the channel. If you have any comments or questions for me, please leave them down in the comments section below and I'll do my best to answer them. But now let's jump into the lesson and begin the flight. So just before we head over to the aircraft, we'll start the lesson by briefly outlining the processes that we're expecting to carry out throughout the flight. The two primary means of navigation that we'll have during this flight are our VFR navigational chart and our navigation log. It might seem logical that the VFR navigation chart would be the primary means of navigation and that the navigation log would be more of an afterthought. However, quite the opposite is actually true, as we'll see throughout the lesson. Our navigation log provides us with some primary means of navigating the aircraft. Specifically, we have our magnetic heading, our time en route for each leg, and also the fuel calculation column for assessing the aircraft's fuel state. So as you'll see throughout the course of this lesson, we'll predominantly be using the navigation log data as our primary means of navigation, flying our magnetic headings and en route times, with reference to the aircraft's directional gyro and the onboard clock. We should find that if we fly these headings and timings accurately, even with very little reference to the navigational chart, we'll be able to end up at our desired waypoint at our desired time. So just as a quick refresher, the first column of magnetic headings that we're looking at, they're what we'll be flying based off the aircraft's compass or directional gyro, both of which are referenced to magnetic north. Each time we turn over a waypoint, we'll look at the next magnetic heading in the column and then we'll turn onto that heading. For the ETE, or estimated time en route, that's the time between each waypoint. So once we head over a waypoint, we'll note down the time. We'll then add on the estimated time en route to get the expected arrival time at the next waypoint. And finally the fuel. We'll write in the top of the column the amount of fuel in minutes on board that we have on the aircraft, and then we'll update this figure as we pass over each waypoint. We'll discuss more about all of these things once we actually fly the lesson. In terms of our VFR navigational chart, of course it's a very useful and necessary tool to have, and we will still be using it throughout the flight, but as I say, it's very much more used as a reference to confirm position rather than as a primary means of navigation. To use the chart, we'll be looking at features that we can see on the route. We'll be trying to find large, easy to identify features, and then we'll be looking outside the aircraft to confirm that we can see those features. It's highly recommended that you use the method of looking at the chart first and then looking outside for said features. If you do it the other way around and you look outside and then try and look at the chart to confirm the features, you'll find that it's actually much easier to confirm your own biases, and you'll try and make the chart fit the picture that you're seeing outside in order to comfort yourself that you are in the correct position. Again, we'll discuss more about this during the course of the lesson. Finally, before carrying out the flight, we'll just discuss a few procedures that we'll be looking to carry out over each waypoint during the flight. So the first set of procedures that we'll be carrying out as we pass over each waypoint are the 3 T's. The first T is turn, so once we're overhead the waypoint, of course we'll turn on to our next magnetic heading. The second T is time. As soon as we're over our waypoint, we'll stop the stopwatch, we'll note down the arrival time, and then we'll add on our estimated time en route to get the arrival time updated for our next waypoint. And finally, torque. Not always necessary, and indeed it won't be during this flight, but sometimes it might be relevant to call on the radio over a particular waypoint to inform air traffic control of your position. After we've turned towards our next waypoint and we're comfortable that the aircraft is headed in the right direction, we've performed our 3 T's check. The next thing we'll do is carry out our clear-off checks. Clear-off stands for compass, log, engine, altimeter, radio, orientation and fuel. For the compass, we'll make sure that the aircraft's directional gyro is still aligned with the aircraft's compass, so that the heading we're flying is actually referenced to magnetic north. For the log, we'll make sure that we fill down our times in the flight log. For our engine, we're checking that the engine's temperatures and pressures are still within limits and that the engine is running normally. Also, in relevant conditions, we'll check for any carburetor icing. Altimetry, we make sure that we are at the correct altitude based on the flight plan, as well as making sure that the altimeter is still referenced to the correct setting. Radios, we can make sure that the aircraft radios are tuned correctly, and also that the standby radio is tuned for any upcoming frequencies. Orientation, we make a gross error check to make sure that the aircraft is headed roughly in the right direction, both in terms of our heading and also in terms of any major features around us, be that terrain or bodies of water, things of that nature. And finally fuel, we fill out the fuel record on the navigation log to keep a record of the aircraft's fuel state, to make sure that the aircraft does in fact have enough fuel to complete the route and arrive at destination with a reasonable, safe amount of fuel. Once again, we'll discuss all these processes in more depth throughout the tutorial. So now let's jump into the cockpit of the Cessna 152 and begin the flight. So once again, welcome back to the cockpit of the Cessna 152 for the final part of this particular flight school series. As you can see, it's a nice day over here in western Arkansas for our navigation flight. We'll get the aircraft started up and we'll head off on our route. So before starting engine checklist, pre-flight inspection has been completed. Passenger briefing is complete. Seatbelts and harnesses are secure. Fuel shut-off valve is on. Circuit breakers are checked in. Radios and electrical equipment is off. Brakes are tested and set. Starting the engine, we'll go mixture full rich. Throttle 1/4 of an inch open. Carburetor heat is off. Beacon will turn on. Turn the nav lights on. Prime, we'll prime the engine 3 times. Battery switch is on. Area is clear. Clear prop! And there goes the engine. Bring the RPM up to 1000. Oil pressure is just coming into the green now. Alternator is on. Ammeter showing a discharge, but that's a bug still currently in the sim. Flaps are retracted and checked visually. Navigation lights are on. Radios are on. Transponder will set standby. We're already squawking 1200. We'll set COM 1 for traffic, it's 1229. Heading indicator. So we're showing 170 and 170. ATIS, there's no ATIS here at BIS. We do know the airfield elevation is 644 feet. And we have that set. And we can see that the wind, looking at the windsock, is pretty much straight down runway 26. Altimeter is set. And we'll advise traffic now that we are taxiing for runway 26.
Seven Mike Tree, traffic Cessna Golf, India Tango Bravo Sierra is taxiing to runway 26.
So it's all clear on the taxiway, park brake off. Keep an eye on that truck. Where's he going? Just keeping an eye on that truck, he's right in the way. So So again, you can see we have a very slight wind straight down the runway. We'll taxi over to the holding point and we'll carry out our engine run up. So swinging the aircraft round into wind. Park brake is set. It's 1000 RPM. Before takeoff checklist, nose wheel is straight, brakes are set and holding. Flight controls. Are full free and in the correct sense. Fuel shut-off valve is on, mixture is rich, throttle will come up to 1700 RPM. So 1700. Mixture is set. Carburetor heat will check. And there we see a drop in RPM, the carburetor heat is working. Magnetos. It's about a 50 RPM drop there. And the same on the other side. Back to both. Engine gauges, all temperature and pressure is in the green. Suction is in the green. Throttle will come back to idle. And we're idling around 650 RPM. That's checked. Back up to 1000. Throttle friction nut is adjusted. Communication radios are set. Flight instruments are checked. Fuel quantities have just over a quarter of a tank in each wing, so they're checked. We have 12 gallons in total for the flight today. Trim set for takeoff. Flaps, we use flap 0 for the takeoff, and the flaps are checked up. Cabin doors and windows are closed and latched. Seats are adjusted. Departure briefing is not required, and we'll contact traffic again and announce the takeoff. So we'll be departing out to the south initially.
7 Mike Tree, traffic Cessna Golf, India Tango Bravo Sierra, taking off runway 26 south departure.
Officially clear on the approach, and it's clear upwind as well. Once again, no need to backtrack the runway, we have enough distance for the takeoff here. So the lights, turn on the taxi, takeoff and strobes. Transponder set to out. Just before we depart, we'll write down our departure time on the flight plan, 11:24. So we are now ready for the takeoff. Let's go. There's full power, RPM is checked, T's and P's are in the green. .55 knots coming back on the stick. And we're up, tapping the brakes. Climb away on runway heading initially to 500 feet. And just pitching down a little bit more, allowing the aircraft to accelerate to 70 knots. Okay, it's 500 feet, we'll start our turn out towards the south, looking for a heading of 197 initially. And we'll be climbing to an altitude of 4,000 feet. So there's our heading of 197 degrees. Once again, it's a nice idea to look at a terrain feature in the distance, point the aircraft towards that feature rather than having to constantly be looking at your heading bug. We'll keep the aircraft climbing. And as I mentioned in the previous lesson, we'll just look at Lake Ouachita. We can see that the lake is out at our 7 o'clock as we would expect. So that's a good gross error check to make sure that we are in fact nicely headed in the right direction. You can see that we are passing over the high terrain that we initially expected to see, which again confirms that we're heading in the right direction and we are at the correct point on our flight plan. Once again, the oil temperature very high there, it's pretty much off the scale, but as we've discussed before, that's just unfortunately a quirk of the default aircraft in the simulator currently. And again, very important that we keep the correct flight tracking here as we are passing between the two sections of airspace that we mentioned in the previous lesson that you can see on the map. And actually, since there is a little bit of light cloud around, we'll level the aircraft off at 3,000 feet just to avoid being at the same level as the clouds. Again, as I mentioned in the previous lesson, we can fly at any altitude we like, up to an altitude of 3,000 feet. You do have to be careful though when you choose to change your cruising altitude at the last minute. If your flight plan's taken the winds into account, then you might find with the different cruising altitude that your winds will be incorrect, and therefore your headings and times for each leg of the flight plan will be incorrect. So it's 3,000 feet, get the aircraft levelled off. Allow the aircraft to accelerate up to 90 knots, which we are now, and then we'll come back on the power to 2200 RPM. So really important to follow your headings as well as your flight plan and times. We're on the heading of 197 and we took off at a time of 11:24, so we're expecting 15 minutes to run until the first waypoint of Lake Greeson, which means our ETA is at 11:39. Again, as I mentioned in the previous lesson, the first features that we're looking out for are the road passing out of Glenwood with the ultralight airfield. Keep an eye out for that just so that we can ascertain that we are on flight plan route and not drifting towards either section of airspace. Also looking at the terrain features, you can get a good idea of where we are in relation to them. And that road should be coming up just after this ridge line ahead of us. Now that we're in the cruise, we'll turn off the landing and the taxi lights. Power settings are good. You can see we're cruising around 95 knots. Just drifted slightly to the left on the heading there. We'll come back to a heading of 197. The more accurately you can fly your headings, the easier all of this will be. At the time now 11:30, which means we've flown roughly 7 minutes since departure. We should be halfway along our leg, roughly over the road leading out from Glenwood towards Caddy Gap, and there below us you can see the river and the road leading out from the town. You can also see the ridge line just ahead of us. That's the other smaller ridge line out to the west of Glenwood. You can already vaguely make out Lake Greeson just off the nose, so again, gross error check, we're obviously on track. And we're just passing over this river now. We can see on the map that that is the river we're looking for. Can't make out the ultralight airfield, but that's to be expected. It would be quite hard to spot. But we do have the town of Glenwood out at our 9 o'clock. And you can see this other road just off at our 11 o'clock running out from Glenwood to the south, which is the road we're roughly going to be following towards the town of Kirby. Probably ever so slightly to the right of track currently, but pretty close. You can see very clearly now the main spar of Lake Greeson that we're aiming for as our first waypoint. And there's the town just below us at our 9 o'clock. So we are pretty much on track. As I say, we're slightly to the right of track. We should have passed directly overhead. There's no need to correct for that now, as we can already clearly see our first waypoint. We will discuss in a later lesson how to correct if you are off track or if you're lost, but it's a bit more advanced, so we'll leave that for today's lesson. So this first body of water jutting out of the lake is not actually the waypoint that we're looking for. As you can see, that's out to the north of the lake. So we want to keep heading in this direction towards the southerly part of the lake. Constantly keeping an eye on our fuel and our engine condition. The fuel gauges, we don't rely on those too much, they're very inaccurate in the Cessna. We'll take recordings at each waypoint of the amount of fuel that we've burned in terms of time. And again today for the flight we're carrying about 1 hour and 40 minutes worth of fuel. The flight's only 40 minutes long, so we've got an extra hour's worth of fuel in reserve. And there's the town of Kirby just off at our 10 o'clock. You can see the crossroads down there. We should be flying directly overhead Kirby, so we are slightly to the right of track, but only by a small amount. Certainly not a major concern. We can already see the first waypoint. And we are having to come slightly left on the heading here. It's a heading of almost 180 to get to the first waypoint. Partially that's because, as I say, we are slightly to the right of track. Also it appears that perhaps the winds up here aren't quite what we'd planned for. So this is Lake Greeson, just off on our right here. And you can clearly see our waypoint now, the furthest, most extreme southeastern point of the lake, and we have the two islands sitting in the body of water as well, just off to the west. So we can confirm that this is our first waypoint. Very important again to look at the map first, try and identify features that you're looking for outside, and then look outside to confirm those features. If you look outside and then try and find features on the map, you'll only find yourself confirming your own biases, and particularly if you're lost, you'll be trying to confirm to yourself that you are where you think you are. Much less likely to make a mistake if you already have in mind what you're going to see outside, and then if you don't see that out the window, you know you're probably not in the right spot, or at least facing in the right direction. And again, the more accurate you can be with overflying your waypoints and making sure that you turn over the waypoint, not before and not after, the easier you'll find the whole process. If you're quite relaxed about where you decide to turn, then the error is just going to add up over time, and ultimately you're more likely to get lost. So we're overhead our waypoint now. We'll make a turn out to the left on a heading of 136. It's visually clear outside. And there's our heading 136 degrees. So we're headed now towards the town of Delight. Expecting to cross a road coming up from Murfreesboro. Which we can already see straight ahead of us. And again, gross error check, we're expecting to see Lake Greeson straight behind us now. And sure enough, it is. So we'll check our compass. Make sure that the directional gyro is aligned with the compass still. If you have the drift option turned on in the simulator, that's particularly important, and it is necessary in the real world. We'll write down our times on the log. So we arrived at Lake Greeson at time 40. And the en route time to the next waypoint of Delight is 7.4 minutes, so expecting to arrive at 47. Engine, we'll check again, the T's and P's, not looking too bad. Our temperature's good. Radio, we'll try and tune now for Dexter B Memorial Airport. That'll save us a task later on. Looking for Kilo Alpha Delta Foxtrot. There we go. It's just a traffic frequency again, 122.7. We'll tune that now. So we have the frequency tuned now for the destination. In terms of our fuel, we burnt 15 minutes getting to Lake Greeson. We departed with 100 minutes, so we now have 85 minutes of fuel remaining. There's the town of Murfreesboro out on our right, as we would expect to see. And we'll be shortly crossing over the road running out from the northeast of Murfreesboro. So again, a nice confirmation that we're broadly on flight plan track. I think already you can make out the road leading into the town of Delight just off the nose, so we can more or less follow that into the town, but again we'll maintain our heading. So the time now 11:45, 2 more minutes to run to Delight. You can already see the town off at our 11 o'clock. And the ASUS at Kilo Alpha Delta Foxtrot's 118175, we'll set that as well so we can get an update on the weather. Just listen out to that now. Okay, it seems we're not going to pick the ATIS up, but we know the wind already is roughly from the west. And we have runway 0422 at the arrival airfield, so we'll take runway 22. You can see more clearly now the town of Delight just passing below us at our 11 o'clock. And again, we'll make sure we fly directly over the top of the town before we turn towards destination. And if we wanted to confirm for ourselves that it is in fact Delight, we have the road running east-west and the other road running out to the south. There's also a couple of nice water features out to the east, however, can't actually see those on the map. We should also see a railway out to the east shortly after we make our turn. So as you can see, it's really important to trust your heading and timing. We've maintained our heading and we've arrived at the town of Delight exactly at 11:47. So we'll turn out now towards the east onto a heading of 078. Again, I'm not seeing those water features on the map, but it would have been a really nice gross error check to make sure we are in the right place and heading in the right direction. So we'll just keep an eye out for that railway instead. So we were 4-7 at Delight. The last leg of the journey is going to take us 13 minutes. So expecting to arrive at Dexter B. Florence Memorial Airfield on the hour, or midday. As I mentioned again in the previous lesson, there are less features that we can use for navigation on this particular leg of the flight. Again, we're really just trusting our heading and our timing until we get closer to destination. We're expecting to see the town of Hollywood just before we reach destination on our left, and then we'll be following Highway 30 up towards the airfield. So again, we'll check our compass, showing 080, 080. We filled in our time on the log, engine T's and P's are good, altimeter's set, radios are set. And for the fuel, we burnt another 7 minutes of fuel, which means over the town of Delight we had 78 minutes of fuel remaining. Again, with the last leg of our route being roughly 15 minutes, expecting to arrive at Kilo Alpha Delta Foxtrot with a little over an hour's worth of fuel, just as we planned. You can see we're now passing over another river, which we can see on the map. And just after that river we should see the railway line, more or less following the contours of the river. There should also be the small town of Antoine just between the river and the railway tracks. Maybe that we've flown directly overhead. And there you can see the road leading off from Antoine out towards the northeast. That leads towards the town of Hollywood, as I mentioned earlier, expecting to pass Hollywood closer to destination. So we're about 10 minutes now outside of destination. We'll call traffic and we'll tell them that we're landing on runway 22. We'll just make a position report.
Kilo Alpha Delta Foxtrot, traffic Cessna Golf, India Tango Bravo Sierra 16 miles west, 3,000 feet inbound to land runway 22.
As you can see, there really are a lot less features now that we can use for navigation. I have to say I'm finding that the USA VFR charts don't seem to give you much information in terms of water bodies. I'm sure something like that would have been on a UK VFR chart and would have been quite a nice guide for navigating. But anyway, we're making do. About 7 minutes to run now till destination. So we're keeping an eye out for Hollywood, just off on our left. And the main thing we're really keeping an eye out for is Highway 30. As soon as we can find that, we can just follow that straight to the destination airfield. So the time now is 5:03, which means we're roughly halfway along our leg. We should be able to see Highway 30 fairly soon. Once again, as the area is rather devoid of features, all we can really do is trust our heading and our timing until we pick up a feature which allows us to confirm our exact position. A couple of features that we might be able to pick up en route. There's two rivers passing across our flight plan track, with a road coming out of the town of Oklahoma crossing over the two rivers. That might be quite a good visual indication of where we are on our flight plan track. And again, that will be pretty much be in the town of Hollywood. You can see a road now just off the nose, sort of passing roughly east to west. I'm pretty sure that's the road coming out of Arkadelphia. So we should be able to see the town shortly. Still can't quite make out the highway yet. And again, roads and the river passing below us. In fact, that looks more like a canal than a river. That's very straight. So 5 minutes to run now until we hit the town of Arkadelphia. can just about make out what I think is the airfield off the nose now. And again, another gross error check. We should see De Grey Lake out to the north of Arkadelphia. And sure enough, you can just make out the lake off in the distance there, just off the left wing at our 9 o'clock. So again, happy that we're on track and we know where we're going. And in fact, it looks like we're just picking up Highway 30 ahead of us now. So that pretty much confirms that what we can see off the nose is the airfield and the town of Arkadelphia just out to the north of that. We'll make another position report.
Kilo Alpha Delta Foxtrot, traffic Cessna Golf, India Tango Bravo Sierra 7 miles southwest, 3,100 feet inbound to land, runway 22.
So now you should be able to clearly see Highway 30. And there's Arkadelphia just off at our 10 o'clock position. We did actually drift slightly to the right on the heading there. Now we've got to keep a good eye out for the airfield. I think I've already visually identified it, but you'd be surprised in the real world it can sometimes be quite tricky to spot an airfield actually. So I can see the runway now, it's right by the railway track. And again, just out to the south of the town. We'll start descending down into the pattern, so we'll come back on the power. Out comes the carb heat. Landing light and taxi light can go on. And we'll descend down to 1,200 feet to enter the circuit. So you can see the railway just passing up beside the airfield, and then we've got the highway passing out to the west of us. So as you can see there, we did actually drift slightly off course on the last leg. I did allow the heading to drift slightly to the right. But again, as long as you're looking at the major features outside, you should be able to get your bearings and very quickly ascertain what you need to do to get back on track. And also, as I say, I think the winds are slightly different in the sim from the real world, which doesn't help. It does make things a lot trickier. But that is a problem you do have to contend with sometimes in the real world as well. So there's 1,200 feet. Get rid of the carb heat. So downwind checks, brakes are off, undercarriage is down, mixture is rich, fuel quantities are sufficient, instruments are checked, landing lights on, and hatches and harnesses are secure. Cool downwind.
Kilo Alpha Delta Foxtrot traffic Cessna Golf, India Tango Bravo Sierra is on downwind runway 22.
And the runway looks clear. Can't hear anyone else on the traffic frequency. So once again we're looking to keep the runway below the left wingtip, and we'll make our turn onto base when we get 45 degrees and being the runway threshold. There's the town of Arkadelphia. Got the river running just to the north of it, heading towards De Grey Lake. There's 45 degrees, we'll start our turn now onto base. Coming back on the power. Letting the aircraft speed reduce. Okay, speed's in the white arc, we'll take a stage of flap. It's all clear on final. And we'll keep coming around onto final. There's full flap. So pitch is full fine, undercarriage is down, flaps are set, landing clearance is not required, and the runway is clear.
Kilo Alpha Delta Foxtrot traffic Cessna Golf, India Tango Bravo Sierra is on final runway 22 to land.
We'll try and vacate at the first exit on the right, so we'll try and land as close to the threshold as possible. So there's touchdown. And just applying the brakes to slow the aircraft down before the runway exit. We'll announce clear of the runway.
Kilo Alpha Delta Foxtrot traffic Cessna Golf, India Tango Bravo Sierra is clear of the runway.
And we'll just find a spot to park the aircraft up. We'll taxi down to the end here and we'll take the last spot on the right. So park brake on, it's 1000 RPM. Offline check, there's flaps up. Carburetor heat is off. Landing light, taxi light and strobes can go off. Transponder off. And securing the aeroplane, radios and electrical equipment off. Throttle idle. Magnetos will check for grounding. They're checked. Bring the throttle back up to 1000 RPM. And then we'll cut the mixture. So the engine stopped, ignition off, master switch off, beacon off, close the throttle, and that is us, the flight is complete. Welcome to the town of Arkadelphia and Dexter B. Florence Memorial Airport. So there you go guys, as you can see by putting together everything that we've learned in the last 7 lessons, we were able to safely and accurately navigate the aircraft from A to B. And hopefully now, having completed the flight school series, you'll be able to do the same. I do hope that everyone found the series of use, particularly for those of you who are newer to flight simulation. And of course I also hope that you enjoyed the series. As always, if you did, please consider giving it a like and subscribing to the channel. If you have any comments or questions for me, please leave them down in the comments section below and I'll do my best to answer them. But for now, thanks very much, and I'll see you all again soon.